a lot of good points there. We'll change gears. We'll switch over to the focus of Nebraska now.
All right.
Let's talk about just quickly that the basketball game over the weekend. We can talk both men and women, because the women took on Caitlin Clark, and of course that had a lot of eyes on it. But the men, of course, on the road, and once again, the road struggles continue. For me, it's rebounding. For you, and it can be the same, what have you taken immediate notice of when looking back at this team's road struggles?
Well, I think a lot of teams struggle on the road. They're not the only ones. And, there have been stretches where I think they've played well on the road. I think what I watched in that game was that Nebraska got an early lead, and Maryland pushed the press button, and it worked. And Nebraska was really just got messed up. I mean, they were discombobulated by Maryland's press, and that changed the game. And sometimes coaches are too proud to do that early in games, but I thought Maryland did a good job of knowing what they had to do in order to affect change. And that's what I saw. The rebounding piece, I think, does come into play. You don't have Juwan Gary. That doesn't help you. I think there's probably, I'd have to go back and watch it again. My sense is that what Hoiberg's frustrated with is the rebounding on the defensive end of the floor.
Mm-hmm. I
think offensively, Nebraska wanted to get back, and so they weren't necessarily playing for a lot of offensive rebounds. So, I think they're an inconsistent team, because what makes them dangerous is you don't really know who's going to beat you on a given night, and you don't. It could be Casey, it could be Mast, it could be DJ, it could be Bryce, it could be Juwan when he's healthy. The flip side of that is there are nights when none of them are on, or you don't know what's going to get you beat. And I think that's the flip side of the coin, is that sometimes, when you have a team like that, and things aren't going well for one or a couple other guys don't step up, and then it kind of snowballs into what it's going to be. So, that's a little bit of the nature of this team. There's times when they miss Sam Griesel, for sure. But, I always kind of thought it was going to be an NIT squad. We'll see. They have a huge game on Wednesday. If they win that game at PBA, they're right back on track for where they want to go. So they do need to win a road game somewhere in there. But I don't think Maryland was their easiest road game remaining. I really don't. I think they've got a few more that are frankly more winnable, and we'll see what happens.
We're talking with Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, you mentioned that Wisconsin game coming up this week. That is one of 5 home games remaining for Nebraska. Obviously, beating a top 15 Wisconsin team would be a huge resume builder for Nebraska. But if they're not able to get that one, and they aren't able to get any road wins, that puts them at 19 wins in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
In your mind, is that enough to get them into the NCAA tournament, or would they need help in the Big Ten tournament, winning a game or two, in order to kind of give themselves a chance at that at-large bid?
Yeah, I think if they end with 19 in the regular season, they're going to have to win 2 in the Big Ten tournament, and then they're going to have to hope.
Mm-hmm.
If they win 20 in the regular season, then I don't know that they need to win one in the Big Ten tournament, although it wouldn't hurt.
Sure.
If they get to 20, I don't know how many wins that means for them in the league. I think it means 10 wins or 11. I can't remember. But if they get there, then you're looking at, a 6 or a 7 seed. You get a favorable draw. I think 21 probably gets you there. If they beat Purdue, which they did,
mm-hmm.
and they beat Wisconsin on Thursday, I think the tournament committee is going to say, listen, yeah, this team struggles on the road, but when they have to go beat good teams, they've done that. And, that's, I think, part of what they will say. And then they've got an opportunity to go to Northwestern and sweep Northwestern. And if you sweep Northwestern, that's 2 games that you have over another bubble team. And that's a separator.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a separator moment. And so that's a game that you want to circle in purple. Go beat Northwestern, because Northwestern's right on the bubble too. And quite frankly, they look at times to me to be a better team than Nebraska. But Nebraska beat them once. And if Nebraska beats them again, there's no argument. Like Nebraska's got that, has got the thing. Kansas State's going to go into meltdown mode, but Nebraska's got an advantage over them. And then I don't anticipate it being a super strong year on the, the mid-major bubble. It looks like I don't know. It just, some years what you're running into is the committee likes to reward, no offense to the committee, East Coast basketball teams that play in mid-major leagues because that's what they grew up with and they like it. I don't know that that's this year. I don't know if that's, there's years where the A10 gets 4 or 5 and you're like, really? And last year the Mountain West got 5 and they San Diego State advanced far, but the other teams didn't do great. So, there's years where you can tell they get real enamored with mid-major teams that, then sit there as an 11 or a 12 as if they're not very good, but they're good at, whatever. And so we'll see how that all turns out. I think Nebraska's got a favorable opportunity this year if they get to 20, which in my opinion means they beat Wisconsin. So biggest game of the year is Wisconsin. Second biggest game remaining is Northwestern. You win those 2, and you're going to win some other ones along the way.
Sam, you mentioned that game at Northwestern. In your mind, is that the most winnable road game left on the schedule, or is it just the most important because Northwestern's also a bubble team?
I don't know what Michigan's crowd's going to look like when Nebraska goes there.
Sure. By that
they
time
don't have a lot of success. They don't have a lot of success against Michigan. Michigan's athleticism seems to give Nebraska problems. They have never beaten Michigan there, and so that I think will be an issue. But that may be the team that's the most beatable. So they play at Illinois. They go to Penn State, do they not?
No, Penn State's at home.
They go to Indiana.
They go to Indiana and Ohio State.
They go to Indiana, Ohio State. I don't know. I mean, again, Ohio State's a team that Nebraska just hammered. And, Ohio State's crowd may or may not show up. You just never know. So, and they've beaten Ohio State at Ohio State before. They're not afraid to do that. They did it 2 years ago. So you never know. I mean, I think usually it's when you least expect it, you get one of them. And
so you're saying at Illinois?
Yeah. They've had a hard time there too. Illinois is a hard team for Nebraska to beat as well. They have not beaten Illinois, I think, in the Hoiberg era. So that's a tough one. That's a tough one too.
Sounds like a lot of things I've heard before, at least recently with Nebraska. I haven't had that win in this era. Oh, wait, what happened this year, right?
Yeah, I know.
Here, Sam, let's change gears and talk football for the last 5 minutes of this because it was another big recruiting weekend. But, one thing for me, I noticed that it's never a dull moment with this staff going the extra mile on the recruiting trail. We even had Coach Rule you mentioned Michael Jordan earlier. He took the MJ approach with Cortez's mom and trying to win her over just as much as he's trying to win Cortez over. Where does that approach rank among the importance of securing a commitment in general, though? Because it just seems like Rule has such a good grasp on working in the whole family.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to recruit. I try to recruit the whole group. I think he's probably pretty effective with parents. That would be my hunch. He's a convincing person. He's a genuine person. I think if you talk to Matt Rule for very long, he's pretty real. And I think that probably works with parents and probably works with kids. I could see there being some athletes that are like, hey, he seems a little intense, and I'm going to go with this guy over here because maybe he isn't quite as, ferocious of a personality. But, I mean, Rule's got a talent for being honest. And I think one of his strengths is that he's going to be really clear up front about what he's about, what his staff's about. And you're either going to like that and say, yeah, I want to be a part of that, or you're not. I think there's going to be very little gray area. So very little like, oh, I came under false pretenses, and I realized I hate this place, and it's not what I thought it would. I think he takes pains to say this is exactly what it's going to be like. And like he tells people this is how cold it is, and all those things. So I think he tries to put a lot of that stuff up front. He's good with the parents that way. I don't know if they'll get Cortez Mills. In fact, I would bet against it. But I think they've done a really good job of being really direct with players. And somewhere along the way, you get somebody that's like, yeah, I want to be there. Ja'Cory Barnes. He didn't have to go to Nebraska. He did not have to go to Nebraska. And I think that's an example of like, okay, yeah, I'll come and see what it's, this suits me. And I think that's one of the strengths of rules recruiting. It wasn't Mike Riley's strength, and Scott Frost could be kind of wishy-washy. I don't know. Like some people didn't always know where Scott Frost was coming from because he was a little bit more reserved. But I would say Matt Rule is similar to Bo. I mean, Bo couldn't hide who he was, so he was incapable of doing so. And so, you either wanted to come or you didn't. And there was a lot of guys who didn't. But Rule's similar. I think he's a little bit more personable than Bo was.
Sam, you talk about Cortez Mill, you talk about Ja'Cory Barney. That kind of goes into what you wrote this morning or for this morning's Monday Rewind about Coach Rule going all in on Miami and Florida. Is him being upfront and honest about what you're getting, does that give you hope that he can be more successful in the Sunshine State than, say, Scott Frost or Mike Riley, who did land some guys from Florida but had a really hard time retaining them?
So this is what I wrote today for listeners who may not have read it. I think they had 24 non-IMG Academy recruits. We don't count IMG because none of the guys are actually from Florida. And so I think they had 24 between 2014 and 2023, 2022 or something like that. I'm not counting, Dwight Boodle in there. And so out of that group, I think their hit rate was like 7 of 24. And I'm being generous there because I'm including like Marvin Scott and Taman Lynham, guys that I would describe as like full-time starters. But out of that group, they had the full-time starters were DiCaprio Boodle, Chris Jones, the corner from back in the day, and then Alex Davis, who I don't know that you would have described Alex Davis as one of the better defenders in Husker history, but he did start for 2 years. He started on the 2017 defense, my goodness. And so what I would say is that they haven't had much of a hit rate down there. They've had a lot of guys leave, maybe some misevaluations. As you look at the guys that they signed in 2020 who actually turned out to be a dependable player in the collegiate level, oldie Jaden Francois, and Jaden Francois is on his third team. So, I think there's some of it's talent evaluation, some of it's they get the guys up here and they really need to develop the culture, make sure that they know why they're here. I do think there's a moment where you get to a certain number of kids from Miami and they all are like, yeah, we got each other's back. And I think that's what they're going for. That's part of what they're trying to get at is having each other's backs. I think that's important. And so I think they're trying to recruit that city. We'll see if it pans out.
Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, good stuff this morning. We appreciate your time as always. We will talk to you again next week.
Bye.
See you, Sam.
Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Really good stuff there from Sam. In just a minute here, we will jump into some other local college football news with Iowa and Scott Docterman because they finally hired an offensive coordinator, and I don't know how excited people are about it.
I believe the saying is know thy enemy.
Coming up next, we got more Hurrdat Sports Radio.